Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors meeting of June 7, 2016. Today is Election Day, and the polls will be open until 8 o'clock in your neighborhoods, as well as 8 o'clock at City Hall. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Avalos?
Here.
Avalos present. President Breed?
Here.
Breed present. Supervisor Campos? Present. Campos present. Supervisor Cohen?
Present.
Cohen present. Supervisor Farrell? Farrell present. Supervisor Kim? Here. Kim present. Supervisor Marr?
Here.
Marr present. Supervisor Peskin?
Present.
Peskin present. Supervisor Tang?
Present.
Tang present. Supervisor Wiener? Wiener present. Supervisor Yee? Yee present. Madam President, you have all members are present.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Can you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Play ball.
All right. Madam Clerk, are there any communications?
I have none to report, Madam President.
Colleagues, are there any changes to the April 26th or May 3rd, 2016 board meeting minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve those minutes? Motion by Supervisor Campos, seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, can we take that without objection? Without objection, those meeting minutes will pass after public comment. Madam Clerk, please read the consent agenda.
Items 1 through 8 are considered routine. If a member objects, an item may be removed and considered separately.
Seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On items 1 through 8, Supervisor Yee. Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos?
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos? Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen?
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell? Aye. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr?
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang?
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener? Wiener, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those items are passed on the first reading, adopted, finally passed, and approved unanimously. Item 9, please.
Item 9 is an ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to prohibit the use of city funds or resources to assist in the enforcement of federal immigration law, except for individuals who have been convicted of a violent or serious felony and held to answer for that violent or serious felony.
Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to again thank everyone who worked together to come to this agreement. We have unity as a city as to what our sanctuary city policy will be. And so I want to thank most of all Sheriff Hennessy for working with us till the very last minute, last time, and I want to thank her for her flexibility in helping to move to this unity. I also want to thank, of course, Free SF, the coalition that worked on this legislation with my office and with the Sheriff's office, in particular, the Asian Law Caucus, Saira Hussein, and Causa Justa. There are so many organizations to also mention, but I think I'd be best to mention Mujeres Unidas y Activas, and of course, Jeremy Pollock in my office who worked on this. So, colleagues, this is our second reading, and I want to thank you for coming together unanimously to support this united policy we have here in San Francisco.
Thank you. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the ordinance is finally passed unanimously. Item number 10, please.
Item 10 is an ordinance to appropriate $207 million of revenue bond proceeds to the Municipal Transportation Agency for transportation projects and equipment in fiscal year 2016 through 17.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance is passed unanimously on the first reading. Item number 11.
Item 11 is an ordinance to appropriate approximately $6 million to the Municipal Transportation Agency, consisting of $3,050,000 to total general fund contribution in combination with several other sources to support planning, design, and outreach for the transportation capital improvement projects in connection with the proposed Golden State Warriors Event Center and mixed-use development in Mission Bay.
Supervisor Avalos?
Thank you, Madam President. I was the only person who voted against the special fund for the Warriors Arena transportation facilities, and I do have to vote against this again. This is actually what comes down to be a subsidy for the Warriors Arena. I believe that the Warriors should be paying more for the uses of funds to manage transportation and traffic impacts around the arena. And so this is, to me, is a symbol of how places that don't have a lot of development, that don't have a lot of economic activity, lose out in how we make decisions about where we allocate funds for facilities and transportation projects as well as housing. So I will be voting against it. I expect that I could be on the short end of the stick, but I need to stand up for what I think is a wrong way that we do our budgeting across the city, where places in the city that are seeing robust development tend to absorb a lot of general fund dollars that could be available for other places that are not seeing that kind of development.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Seeing no other names on the roster, Madam Clerk, on the item, can you please call the roll?
On item 11, Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
No.
Avalos, no. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. There are 10 ayes and 1 no, with Supervisor Avalos in the dissent.
The ordinance passes on the first reading. Item 12, please.
Item 12 is an ordinance to deappropriate approximately $7.6 million in surplus revenue designated for the general reserve from the library and to reappropriate as debt service payment in fiscal year 2015 through 16.
Seeing no names on the roster, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
On item 12, Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener. Wiener, aye. There are 11 ayes.
The ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Item 13 through 19, Madam Clerk, can you please call them all together?
Items 13 through 19 utilize revenues and multiple sources and reappropriates to different years, so bear with the slow reading. These items are very dense. Item 13 is an ordinance to appropriate a total of $272 million of proceeds from revenue bonds, State of California Water Resources Control Board revolving loans funds or grant funds, water revenues and water capacity fees for the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission or SFPUC, Water Enterprise Capital Improvement Program for fiscal years 2016-17 at $150 million and for fiscal year 2017 through 18 at $122 million. And to reappropriate approximately $84 million for water capital improvement project appropriations, $57 million in fiscal years 2016 through 17, and $27 million in fiscal year 2017 through 18, and placing $221 million of revenue bonds and state loan funds or grant funds proceeds and $5.3 million of water capacity fee proceeds by project on Controller's Reserve. Item 14 is an ordinance to appropriate a total of approximately $1.2 billion of proceeds from revenue bonds, State of California Water Resources Control Board's revolving loan funds or grant funds, wastewater revenue, and capacity fees for the SFPUC's wastewater enterprise capital improvement programs for 2016 through 17 and $313 million for 2017 through 18 at $902 million. And to reappropriate $7 million and deappropriate approximately $10.8 million in wastewater revenue bond projects in fiscal years 2016 through 17, and placing $1.1 billion in revenue bonds or state loan or grant funds and $14.6 million in capacity fees by project on Controller's Reserve. Item 15, ordinance to appropriate a total of $158 million of Hetch Hetchy revenue, cap and trade revenue, and power and water revenue bonds for the SFPUC's Hetch Hetchy Capital Improvement Program, and to reappropriate $11.3 million in power revenue bond fund projects in fiscal years 2016 through 17, and to deappropriate $4.2 million in CEC loan and revenue fund projects, and placing $32.5 million of power bonds and $44.3 million of water bonds and $4.2 million of cap and trade revenue on Controller's Reserve. Item 16 is an ordinance to authorize the issuance and sale of tax-exempt or taxable wastewater revenue bonds and other forms of indebtedness by the SFPUC in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $1.1 billion to finance the cost of various capital wastewater projects benefiting the wastewater enterprise. Item 17 is an ordinance to authorize the issuance and sale of tax-exempt or taxable water revenue bonds and other forms of indebtedness by the SFPUC in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $265 million to finance the costs of various capital water projects benefiting the water enterprise. Item 18, ordinance to authorize the issuance and sale of tax-exempt or taxable power revenue bonds and other forms of indebtedness by the SFPUC in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed approximately $32.5 million to finance the costs of various capital projects benefiting the power enterprise, and authorizing to issue refunding power revenue bonds, declaring the official intent of the Commission to reimburse itself with one or more issues of tax-exempt or taxable bonds, and ratifying previous actions taken. And item 19 is a resolution to approve and authorize the conveyance of one permanent easement to the City of Modesto for $35,000 to be paid by J.W.G. McHenry, an LLC, to allow the widening of a portion of McHenry Avenue and other improvements for property owned by the city under the jurisdiction of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission.
Thank you. And on those items, colleagues, can we take them same house, same call? Without objection, those ordinances pass unanimously on the first reading, and the resolution is adopted. Madam Clerk, please call items 21 through 26.
Madam President, item 20 is a standalone item. Should I call that one by itself?
Oh,
First?
yes. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Item 20 is a resolution to authorize the sale, issuance, and execution of one or more series of San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency revenue bonds in an amount not to exceed $207 million.
Colleagues, can we take that item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Now, please call item 21 through 26.
Item 21 is a resolution declaring the intent of the City and County of San Francisco to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of future bonded indebtedness in an amount not to exceed $50 million for 455 Fell Street. Item 22 is a resolution to authorize the execution and performance of an option to ground lease in connection with the parcel located at 455 Fell Street at no cost. Item 13 is a resolution to declare the intent of the city to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of future bonded indebtedness in an amount not to exceed $140 million for 2060 and 2070 Folsom Street. Item 24 is a resolution to authorize the execution and performance of an option to ground lease in connection with a parcel located at 2070 Folsom Street for no cost. Item 25 is a resolution in an amount not to exceed $240 million for 1601 and 1677 Mariposa Street, 485 through 497 Carolina Street, 395 and 420 Wisconsin Street, and 210 Arkansas Street for an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $240 million. And item 26 is a resolution in an amount not to exceed $222 million for 909 and 921 Howard Street, 206 through 228 Fifth Street, and 414 Tahama Street, a resolution declaring the intent of the city to reimburse certain expenditures from proceeds of future bonded indebtedness.
Thank you. Supervisor Campos.
Thank you, Madam President. Just clarification for the record. I think the clerk said that item 1605818 is item 13. It's actually item 23. Just wanted to make that clarification.
Thank you. Are we clear, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
President.
Okay, with that, colleagues, can we take these items, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolutions are adopted unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call item number 27.
Item 27 is a resolution to approve a cooperative agreement between the City and the State of California Department of Transportation concerning the design and construction of the 19th Avenue Combined City Project, including pedestrian safety, transit improvements, and utility upgrades along 19th Avenue between Junipero Serra Boulevard and Lincoln Way.
Same House, same call. Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Item 28, please.
Item 28 is an ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to require the installation and use of telematic vehicle tracking systems in all motor vehicles owned or leased by the City and other than vehicles used for law enforcement, and submission of an annual report by the City Administrator on vehicle use based on data derived from those systems, and to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination.
Supervisor Yee.
Thank you, President Bree. The legislation for you to consider today is about increasing public safety and accountability of public dollars. In 2014, San Francisco adopted a Vision Zero policy where we have committed to work toward the goal of zero traffic deaths by 2024. We have a long ways to go. Every year, about 30 people lose their lives and over 200 are seriously injured while traveling on our streets. These deaths and injuries are unacceptable and preventable. Vision Zero is about city officials, city employees, and community members working together and committing to create safer streets. What is being brought forward for your consideration today is to extend telematics into the majority of our city fleets of more than 7,800 vehicles. In the last 5 years, we have spent nearly $77 million in litigation and settlements directly related to our city's fleet of vehicles. As elected officials, we are charged with and expected to be accountable for our public dollars. This is why last year I directed the budget legislative analysts to produce a report and held a hearing on this report that was co-sponsored by many of you. The benefits shown on this report in terms of safety improvements, savings, and environmental benefits are clear, undeniably beneficial, and proven. Telematics has been used as a tool to correct, train, and coach in order to improve driving habits, decrease inappropriate or unauthorized use, and has shown to have environmental benefits in reducing emissions in many locations in the United States. Telematics, sometimes referred to as the black boxes, is a technology that has GPS along with capacities to collect information and data such as speed, heart braking or acceleration, mechanical diagnosis. This technology is currently in 39% of our city's fleet of vehicles and has already proven to have increased safety by reducing the number of collisions. For example, MTA conducted a pilot with a similar technology and 1 year reduced collisions by 50%. I want to thank the advocates who have supported this legislation, including Walk SF, the Bike Coalition, the Senior and Disability Network, and the Vision Zero Coalition. I would also like to thank my staff, Erica Mayborn, who saw this legislation through. Now, what I'd like to mention here is that we are not including law enforcement officers at this point because there were some details to be worked out, and I didn't want to stall this process anymore for the rest of the fleets. But I rest assured that I will be working with our city administrator, who will come up with a report in the next few months so that we could move forward to include the law enforcement officers in this particular item for my follow-up legislation. It is critical that we work toward our Vision Zero goals by changing our culture through smart and proven policies and through our language and how we speak about our goals. So this is the reason I am making a motion for 2 minor amendments. You have a copy of that, and that will be better aligned. These these basic minor language amendments better align with our Vision Zero goals. So on page 1, line 24, to reduce all traffic fatalities, and on page 2, line 13, the word accident, which may not be avoidable, is changed to collisions. So we're not talking about accidents anymore, we're talking about collisions, which we can work to address and reduce. So, colleagues, I hope you will all be joining me to support this.
Supervisor Yee has made a motion. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Peskin. Colleagues, can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes unanimously. Supervisor Kim?
Thank you. I just wanted to add my name as a co-sponsor, and I want to thank Supervisor Norman Yee and his office for his work to put this into implementation. When we attended the Vision Zero conference in New York over a year and a half ago, this vehicle tracking system was really viewed as one of the key and critical components to ensuring Vision Zero by city-owned and city-driven vehicles, of which there are many here in San Francisco. So I'm glad to see that we are moving this forward, and want to thank Supervisor Yee for his work.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call, as amended? Okay, without objection, this ordinance passes unanimously as amended on the first reading. Item 29, please.
Item 29 is an ordinance to amend the Administrative Code to require appraisals and appraisals review for certain city jurisdictional transfers, acquisitions, conveyances, and leases of real property, requiring that appraisals conform to the uniform standard of professional appraisals practices and be prepared by qualified appraisers, and to increase the rent limits for the Director of Property's existing authority to enter into leases for the city.
Colleagues, can we take this item? Supervisor Peskin?
Madam President, first of all, I would like to thank my staff, Lee Hepner, as well as the head of our Department of Real Estate, John Updike, for working on this matter for the last several months. The legislation before you is really an update to Chapter 23 of the Administrative Code that will standardize how the city acquires and conveys real property, as well as how we deal with leases. This is modeled in many ways after state and federal law, and will ensure that the city gets at least 100% of the appraised market value when it sells or leases land. Also provides for third-party appraisal review of appraisals above certain threshold values. I also want to thank our enterprise departments for their engagement on this legislation. As we all know, the enterprise departments, which include the MTA, the port, the Airport, and Public Utilities Commission, have some discretion to conduct real property transactions on their own outside of the purview of our Department of Real Estate. This legislation provides standard procedures for leases that enterprise departments enter into without interfering with the core functionality of these enterprise departments under the city charter. To that end, I have some brief amendments based on our conversations with port staff, which you can find on page 8 of the subject legislation. I've previously distributed copies to all of you. Specifically at page 8, lines 7 through 10, we would like to amend to add the following language, quote, unless the executive director of the port determines for real property under port jurisdiction that the rental rate for the proposed lease meets or exceeds the Port Commission's annually adopted parameter rental rate for such real property. At line 14 on the same page, remove the language, executive director of the port determines that applying the market rent requirement would conflict with the Port Commission's annually adopted parameter rental rate for the proposed leases. That was dealt with in the previous amendment. And finally, on line 12 of the same page, add the language sub 2, the Board of Supervisors has found by resolution that a lesser sum will further a proper public purpose, or 3, then skip to line 16, commission or agency determines with director of property concurrence that an independent, appropriately qualified real estate economic expert is better suited than an appraiser to perform the rental analysis. If there are any questions, there are representatives of the port on hand with regard to those amendments. If not, I would like to move those amendments and adopt the legislation as amended on its first reading.
Just for clarity, Supervisor Peskin, you don't have those amendments for distribution?
Yes, and they've been previously distributed to all your offices, and I have extra copies here.
Okay. All right. Supervisor Peskin has made a motion to amend. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Campos. Colleagues, can we take this without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. And I just had a point of clarification question. Supervisor Peskin, I apologize that I didn't get a chance to talk to you about this before, but we in my district have a situation with a property that's under the former successor agency of the redevelopment, which is an appraised property, but there's a high expectation of significant community benefits that will be attached to this property. We're required under state law to dispose of the asset, yet there is going to be a challenge to hold any property or future property owner accountable to providing a significant level of community benefits without attaching that somehow to a price negotiation. And I want to understand how this legislation could impact, a project of that nature.
So first of all, and we have counsel here, but I do not believe that our Chapter 23 provisions apply to OCII, the successor agency, and they indeed invoke an appraisal statute under state law, as you previously referenced. But relative to an appraisal process, the value of the property is what a knowledgeable buyer would pay a knowledgeable seller based on comparable sales of similar property. If those community benefits were to be deducted from that value, it would be an appraisal problem, and somebody would have to assess the value of those community benefits, which presumably would be a deduction from the appraised fair market value.
Okay. And then, so if that happens in the case of minus the successor agency, which definitely has its own process, if it happens, for example, in the case of the city disposing of any assets in the same capacity, we're talking about making sure that there's a clear match to the appraised value so that the city ultimately doesn't lose any money.
Correct. And,
okay.
And ultimately, it's a function of how the city, through its Department of Real Estate, instructs an appraiser. So, for instance, in the case of what actually started this whole ball rolling, 30 Van Ness, if the city is demanding that the property include 20% affordable housing on site, that is part of what an appraiser would have to evaluate in conducting that fair market value appraisal.
Great, that clarifies it. Thank you so much. Colleagues, seeing no names on the roster for item number 29 as amended, can we take this item? Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading as amended. Item 30, please.
Item 30 is a resolution to receive and approve annual reports for the Central Market Community Benefit District for calendar year 2014.
Colleagues, can we take this item, same house, same call? Without objection, the resolution is adopted unanimously. Item number 31.
Item 31 is an ordinance to amend the planning code to allow for greater flexibility in the screening and enclosure of rooftop mechanical equipment, modify mid-block alley controls and their applicability to the South of Market Neighborhood Commercial Transit District, Folsom Street Neighborhood Commercial Transit District, and the Regional Commercial District and C3 District to affirm the Planning Department's CEQA determination and make the appropriate findings.
Same house, same call. Without objection, the ordinance passes unanimously on the first reading. Item 32.
Item 32 is a resolution to declare the intention of the Board of Supervisors to order the vacation of a portion of Jesse Street and a portion of Eliam Alley, northwest of Mission and First Streets, in connection with the Oceanwide Center project at 51st Street, subject to certain conditions, and to set the hearing date for all persons interested in the proposed vacation of said street areas.
Supervisor Cohen, you have amendments?
Thank you. I do for item number 32. There's technical amendments. So, colleagues, at the request of our clerk, I have one proposed amendment to this particular item. We've heard both this resolution and the companion ordinance at the May 23rd Land Use Committee. And at that hearing, we did not amend the resolution to include the date for the committee of the whole hearing for the proposed street vacation. So I'd like to move that we amend this item to include that the date which is July 19th. The clerk has circulated copies to you.
Okay, Supervisor Cohen has made a motion to amend. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Marr. Colleagues, can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes unanimously. Supervisor Peskin?
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, I just rise to let everybody know why I am dissenting in this vote, and that is because I think it is terrible planning policy to abandon our streets and alleys. I think we probably all learned that in the 1950s when Jane Jacobs wrote about the life and death of great American cities, and so I will be dissenting on item 32.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, on that, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr. Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
No.
Peskin, no. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. There are 10 ayes and 1 no, with Supervisor Peskin in the dissent.
The resolution is adopted. Please call items 33 and 36 together.
Item 33 is a motion to confirm the Controller's appointment of James Loyce to the Local Homeless Coordinating Board, term ending October 21st, 2019. Item 34 is a motion appointing Joseph Michael Lake to the Assessment Appeals Board Number 3, term ending September 4th, 2017. Item 35 is a motion to reappoint Howard Bloomberg and Howard Strassner to the Pedestrian Safety Advisory Committee, terms ending March 28, 2018. And item 36 is a motion to appoint Marilyn Tesconi to the Mental Health Board, term ending January 31st, 2019.
Madam Clerk, on those items, can you please call the roll?
On items 33 through 36, Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Yes.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those items are approved unanimously. Item number 37.
Item 37 is a motion to appoint Luis Lycea and Brent Rotenizer to the Balboa Park Station Community Advisory Committee, terms ending February 24th, 2017.
Supervisor Avalos?
Thank you. This Citizens Advisory Committee is in my district, and since the Rules Committee and today, we've talked with the MTA about actually working towards reauthorizing this Citizens Advisory Committee to enhance and increase the scope and mission of the Advisory Committee as well as its jurisdiction. And so I will be going to the next Advisory Committee meeting at the end of June, and we'll be discussing with them reauthorizing the actual committee and coming forward at the end of July with a new authorization that would change the configuration and structure of this committee. And so today I'll be requesting that we table this item and we'll come back with a new version of it that will actually cover other issues that include bus rapid transit, as well as the jurisdictional issues between City College and the Balboa Park Station area.
Supervisor Avalos has made a motion to table. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Tang. Colleagues, can we take this without objection? Without objection, the motion to table passes unanimously. All right, we are now at our 2:30 commendations, and today we have one commendation from the supervisor from District 1, Supervisor Eric Marr.
Thank you, President Breed and colleagues. I'm honored today, and I thank Supervisor Campos for joining me as well in welcoming the chairperson of the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, Rosemary Cambra, who's here. I wanted to first also say she's an incredible scholar and the great-granddaughter of Avelina Cornates Marin, who was baptized at Mission San Jose in 1864. I won't go into her whole record of service to not only the Ohlone people, but many other tribes, but I'll just say, Chairperson Cambra, thank you for keeping the history, proud legacy, and the ongoing struggles of the Ohlone people alive here in the San Francisco Bay Area region. And on behalf of the people of the city and county of San Francisco, we honor the Muwekma Ohlone tribe, the first peoples of this land, with this commendation from the Board of Supervisors. I wanted to also say that the tribal administrator, Ms. Norma Sanchez, is also here with us in the chambers, and thank you to her for joining us today. And out of respect, I must also acknowledge and thank two of Chairperson Cambra's liaisons in San Francisco who have represented her really incredibly in San Francisco, the late Dr. Espinola Jackson, who we honored in our previous board meetings. And we continue to celebrate and treasure her work on behalf of the Muwekma Ohlone, the Bayview Hunters Point communities, and all of San Francisco. But also we're grateful for Mr. Francisco da Costa's continuation of the legacy and struggle of the Ohlone people here as the San Francisco rep. So I wanted to say on behalf of our city and county, I call upon Chairperson Rosemary Cambra to address the people and the city of San Francisco. But before she speaks, I'd like to allow San Francisco's Rep. Francisco da Costa to say a few words.
So, supervisors, today is a historical moment where two supervisors, David Campos and Eric Ma, both have chosen to honor the first people of San Francisco, the Muwekma Ohlone. So I call upon our chairperson, Rosemary Cambra, to address the chambers and to speak to the supervisors, and also address our mayor, who I suppose is listening to this deliberation.
Orshituhi, Kanakrakad, Rosemary Cambra, Main de la gente, Muwekma. Les quiero decir que estoy muy agradecida por su tiempo y por su amistad. Y queremos hacer un tribu que podemos ayudar a la gente, los que no tienen, los que les faltan. Por eso vine hoy y quiero explicar que mi hermana Espinola Jackson era india también. Y nadie de veras sabe que Espinola Jackson era. Ella iba a hablar con el tribu y nos platicaba. Necesitamos que hablar con ustedes. I'm here today to show my respect to each and every one of you. I also request of you respect and peace. My first grandfather, Panfilio Yacalamni, was born at the Presidio. And he instructed his children, or our previous relations, that we should love and work with one another, especially his children, his grandchildren, not to allow others to suppress us. For some reason, Panfilio knew that with time, people were going to change, and our plight for freedom, or even for wanting to survive on our holy lands, would be a struggle. But not only for our people, but for each and one of you here, because you would have to make the decision to acknowledge us. You would have to make the decision to respect our people for being and having assets in this area and also having birth rights to all assets, economic assets, and have the opportunity to work with you as a partner. So with that, I want to thank each one of you. Please create a partnership where we can complement one another, so we can allow one another to make their individual religious opinion or express their belief, as well as allow our tribe to exercise their rights to economic development on their holy lands. So with that, I would like to end by saying, I'm here to help the homeless. I am here to help those in need. And we all need somehow, but some more than others. But I'm here. And I believe in taking care of our communities. I made that promise, spiritual promise, to my sister, Espinola Jackson, who held my hand through thick and thin and said, don't give up. And I said, okay, baby, just hold our hand. Give us strength. And she said, you'll have mine. But when I pass, don't forget my work. Don't forget my name. And to this day, I carry baby's name in good work for the people. Thank you, and very much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Looks nice suit, nice tie.
Thank you. Thank you, Prince.
Back to work. Great. I don't think so. I think but it's fun. It's been great. Going on.
Thank you for your service, and again, congratulations. And with that, colleagues, we will return to our regular agenda and move to committee reports.
Item 42 was considered by the Government Audit and Oversight Committee at a regular meeting on Thursday, June 2nd, and was forwarded to the board as a committee report and was recommended as amended with the same title. It is an ordinance to amend the administrative code to revise the residential unit conversion ordinance to require hosting platforms to verify that a residential unit is on the city registry prior to the listing, to require hosting platforms to respond to notices and requests for information, to provide for civil, administrative, and criminal penalties against hosting platforms for violations of the residential unit conversion ordinance, and to affirm the Planning Department's determination.
Supervisor Weiner, you have an amendment?
President Reed.
Supervisor?
Sorry, before we begin any deliberations, I'd like to ask to be recused from this item as well for the same reasons about the resolution around short-term rentals a few weeks ago.
Okay, Supervisor Farrell would like to be excused. Is there a motion? Moved by Supervisor Campos, seconded by Supervisor Marr. Colleagues, can we take this without objection? Without objection, you are excused, Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Weiner? Oh, I'm sorry, Supervisor Campos?
Thank you, Madam President. I think it's only appropriate, given the historic nature of today, that I'm wearing a lei as I'm talking about this piece of legislation, which has been a long time coming. I want to thank my co-sponsor, Supervisor Peskin. I want to thank a very broad coalition that includes a very diverse group of people who normally are not on the same side of this type of an issue. But how we got here is after a long fight, including a pretty, I think, difficult fight at the ballot. And what we decided to do in thinking about how to address the problems that clearly remain on this issue is to present, as we have presented, a pretty modest and a pretty simple proposal that essentially tries to preserve San Francisco's housing. This legislation, in a very simple way, mandates that web platforms that engage in short-term rentals support, not hinder, the enforcement of our short-term rental law. Again, as I repeatedly have said, it is not about changing the current law. It's simply about enforcing that law. And that's what Supervisor Prescott and I have put forward. I also want to thank Supervisor Marr and Supervisor Avalos for their co-sponsorship. This proposal mandates that hosting platforms like Airbnb verify that a host has registered with the city before advertising their short-term rental on its website. If a hosting platform fails to do so, the platform itself will be penalized for up to $1,000 a day. While the current law has set rules for hosts, stipulating that all hosts must register with the city, more than 75% of Airbnb's 7,000 plus hosts in San Francisco have in fact not registered. In fact, we have only received 1,800 applications since the launch of the program, and that's essentially 26% of the 7,000 Airbnb hosts that we know of. Short-term rental certificates that have been issued are 1,324, or 18.9% of the 7,000 hosts with Airbnb. Last year's budget analyst report found that Airbnb alone has taken up to 2,000 entire units of housing, 2,000, completely off the market. This is why we need to bring the hosting platforms into compliance. The one thing from our perspective that has been missing in the existing Airbnb short-term rental law is corporate accountability. The weakness of the law is that corporate accountability is essentially non-existent. And it's not surprising, given that the corporation that ultimately controls a large part of the market is the one that actually wrote the law as we know it. I've met with many home sharers, and let me say once again, as we have repeatedly said, Supervisor Prescott and I throughout this process, we support casual hosts. Mom and pop hosts will not be impacted in any way because of this law. We are simply focusing the law and enforcement on the corporations. I want to address a couple of misconceptions about the legislation. Some have claimed that the legislation would force platforms to police short-term rentals. That could not be farther from the truth. If you're a rental car agency and you have to make sure that the person that you rent that vehicle to actually has a license before you rent them a car. That's exactly what we're asking the short-term rental platforms to do here. Second, I'm a huge supporter of internet freedom, and we work carefully not only with the city attorney but also with online advocacy groups to make sure that this legislation passes legal muster. Again, I want to thank the broad range of people who have formed this coalition. Again, my co-sponsor, Supervisor Peskin, and his Chief of Staff, Sonny Angulo, the Tenants Union, Local 2, Choo-Choo, Tenants Together, the San Francisco Apartment Association, Senior Disability Action, Share Better, Housing Rights Committee, and many, many more. I also want to thank the city attorney, especially Rob Kopla, for the phenomenal work that they have done. I especially want to highlight the incredible work over the years on this issue from Carolyn Goosen in my office, and I don't know if Carolyn is in the room, but we would not be able to be here today without Carolyn. With that, before I turn it over to colleagues and hear other comments, I do have a final point to make, and it's by way of a question. If I may, through the chair, I'd like to ask a question, if I may, to the City Attorney, through Deputy City Attorney John Givner. Mr. Givner, through the chair, a number of people have been raising concerns in the press about the Communications Decency Act. Can you explain how we have addressed that issue and how you feel about the legality of what we're putting before this body today?
Deputy City Attorney John Givner. First of all, Supervisor, as we do anytime members of the public threaten litigation to challenge any of the ordinances proposed before this board, we've advised you confidentially regarding the legal issues. But generally, following your direction, we drafted this ordinance in order to avoid the Communications Decency Act issue that has been raised publicly that you mentioned. Essentially, the ordinance does not regulate the content that hosts post on the websites of hosting platforms. Rather, the ordinance merely regulates the business activities of those platforms that engage in booking services.
Thank you, Mr. Givner, and again, thank you to the City Attorney for the amazing work that they have done on this. So with that, colleagues, I respectfully ask for your support. We believe this is a pretty modest piece of legislation, and this is one of those things where we should not be fighting about this. And my hope is that we have as much support on this board as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Campos. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'll be supporting this legislation today. As I've said many times, we need improved enforcement, and I think this, although I know that there are potentially some legal issues here, is a step in the direction of more enforcement. I do want to just note a couple things, and well, one thing in particular. I do not agree with I think sometimes the characterization we hear that no one's registering. The fact is, and we heard this, as you know, colleagues, I hold a quarterly oversight hearing on short-term rental enforcement at the Land Use and Transportation Committee. And what we saw in the last presentation from the Office of Short-Term Rental is that we are seeing an acceleration of registrations. Last year, unfortunately, was a partially lost year because given that basically immediately after we adopted the legislation at issue, it was announced that it was a failure within like 3 or 4 weeks, and Prop F shortly thereafter was proposed. And so not surprisingly, a lot of hosts decided that they were not going to run ahead and register when they didn't even know what the rules were going to be. Once Prop F was defeated by the voters, and since then, we have seen an acceleration in the number of hosts registering. It has been a steady increase, and it has been a significant increase compared to what it was before. When you have this many hosts, it's not going to happen overnight, but we are moving in a positive direction. With that said, improved enforcement is a good thing. We need to enforce the law. I do have an amendment which I have shared with Supervisor Peskin and Supervisor Campos, which we've distributed. One is a technical amendment on page 4, line 8, adding the words providing reservation and payment services for a listing of. This is recommended by the City Attorney, a technical amendment. The amendment that I am also proffering directs the Office of Short-Term Rentals to both promulgate rules and regulations to simplify and streamline the host registration process, and also within 45 days of the effective date of the legislation to report back to the Board of Supervisors with recommendations about how the registration process can be improved, expedited, streamlined, made simpler, made more user-friendly. The process right now is quite cumbersome for many hosts. I mean, especially when you talk about hosts that are only engaged in short-term rentals for, say, a few days a year or a week or two a year. It's a big process to go through for not doing very much short-term renting. And so in order to get those numbers up and to keep that momentum, we need to make the process more streamlined, less cumbersome. And so the legislation, the amendment I'm proposing, would direct the Office of Short-Term Rentals to come back to us and to say or tell us what regulations they've issued to try to improve the process, and if we need to do legislation to make it a more streamlined process, to recommend to us how to proceed. And so that is the amendment that I make, and that is my motion.
Thank you. Supervisor Weiner has made a motion to amend, and the amendments have been circulated. They have been seconded by Supervisor Campos. Colleagues, can we take the amendment without objection? Without objection, the amendment passes. All right. Seeing no other names on the roster, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll on the item?
On item 42 as amended, Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Weiner.
Aye.
Weiner, aye. There are 10 ayes.
The ordinance as amended passes unanimously on the first reading. Item number 43, please.
Item 43 was considered by the Land Use and Transportation Committee at a regular meeting on Monday, June 6th at 1:30 p.m. and was recommended as amended with the same title. It's an ordinance to dedicate city jurisdictional property located on a portion of State Trust Parcel 2, commonly known as Mission Bay Park P6, as open space, public right-of-way, and naming the new park Mission Bay Kids Park, accepting an irrevocable offer for the acquisition facilities that comprise the park improvements, designating said facilities for public open space and park purposes, and accepting the park for maintenance and liability purposes, subject to specified limitations, adopting the CEQA findings, and making other appropriate findings.
Roll call vote.
On item 43.
Oops, excuse me. Supervisor Kim?
Thank you, President Breed. I will be brief. I just want to emphasize the importance of this expedited legislation. We have a children's playground that has been built by our master developer in Mission Bay, and due to several different hurdles and agency bureaucracy, we have not been able to open this park. I do want to acknowledge our many residents who have seen this playground and been incredibly frustrated by seeing a resource that they can't use, given the growing population here in Mission Bay, which we expect to have 15,000 new residents by 2017, many of whom are young couples and families. You can see this when you go to the Mission Bay Library branch. The afternoon story time is packed with young children with their families, and this park is an additional resource that helps us ensure that we are building complete neighborhoods on behalf of our communities. I do want to recognize and thank OCII. I see Mark Slutskin here, who has been working very closely with our office to expedite this process so that we can open this playground in the summertime and ensure that this resource is available to the public. And we will be working very closely with our multiple agencies to see what we can do to expedite this process for future conveyances of parks and streets as we continue to build out this new neighborhood. Colleagues, I ask for your support.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can you please call the roll?
On item 43, Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos.
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen. Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell. Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Weiner.
Aye.
Weiner, aye. There are 11 ayes.
The item passes unanimously on the first reading. Let's go to roll call for introductions.
Supervisor Yee, you're first to introduce new business.
Submit.
Okay. Supervisor Avalos.
Thank you. Today I am submitting a carbon tax, a tax on non-renewable energy that will be used to support the maintenance and expansion of San Francisco's urban forest. This tax would also help to incentivize or make an incentive for people to move to our Clean Power SF program. So it's very timely in that way. Over the years, the city has relinquished its responsibility over maintaining street trees, and I believe that is an act that has disproportionately affected working class communities where single-family homes are predominant. And many people in my district have had a struggle for paying that. So this tax is also linked by an effort to take carbon out of the atmosphere by creating a disincentive for people to receive their electricity from non-renewable sources, as well as to incentivize the trees that will help pull carbon out of the atmosphere. The way that this carbon tax would work, the controller estimates that it would generate about $18 million a year, and there are exemptions. Anyone who receives at least 50% of their electricity from renewable sources, Clean Power SF customers would be exempt from this tax. This tax would continue the broad exemptions for low-income customers that are in the current utility users tax, and that would include all Tier 1 customers who would continue their have their exemption, which represents 40% of residential customers in San Francisco. Care customers as well would be exempt, the ones who receive a family electric rate assistance, the FARA program, would be exempt. Currently, commercial customers pay 7.5% of the tax on both electrical and natural gas, while residential customers pay no tax. So this would actually increase from that 7.5% to 2.5% more to an overall 10% increase. Based on the average residential PG&E bill in San Francisco being $108 for electrical and natural gas use, this tax would be an additional $2.70 a month, all coming from the natural gas side, which is, of course, a non-renewable. And the rest, colleagues, I will submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. President Breed.
Thank you, colleagues. This is an exciting time of the year because there's so many great things happening all over the city and especially in my district, and I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight just a few. Tonight from 5 to 7, SF Jazz and Proxy will be hosting their second annual neighborhood block party at Patricia's Green in Hayes Valley on Octavia and Hayes, which also kicks off the 34th annual SF Jazz Festival. There'll be live music, movies shown on the big screen. The beer garden is always really popular, and some food trucks. So stop by Hayes Valley tonight. On Saturday, June 11th, there's Grillin' in the Mo, which is hosted by Adrian Williams of the Village Project. It's a great event that happens every single year. It's at Hamilton Playground. It's a fun, exciting event. There's food, there's activities for kids, and there's music. A lot of great blues performers will be present. So stop by between the hours of noon and 5 p.m. on Saturday. And finally, on Sunday, there will be the 39th annual Haight-Ashbury Street Fair, which will take place from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. It will be on Haight Street between Cole and Schrader Streets. The fair will feature arts and crafts, food booths, 3 musical stages, and a family area. This year's Stanyon Street stage will also feature performance by Paul Kantner, one of the original members of the Psychedelics rock band, and the Jefferson Starships, and a native San Franciscan. They will be honoring him at that particular stage. Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. And with that, colleagues, I have one last item, an in memoriam for Mrs. Emma Jean Burris. She is the mother of civil rights attorney John Burris, and she passed away this Friday, May 27th, and Supervisor Cohen and I would like to adjourn the board meeting today in her honor. Mrs. Burris was an exceptional dresser with a hallmark of colorful hats. She reminded me a lot of my grandmother. When I would see John Burris post pictures of his mom, she'd always have a beautiful hat on. She had a hat for every occasion, matching gloves, purse, and shoes. Her soul was beautiful, just as beautiful as her outfits, and her motto was, "If I can be helpful, I will," and she was very helpful to so many. For many years, she operated the Summerside Homes in Vallejo, a residential facility for those who are physically handicapped or developmentally disabled. She treated the clients as her children and instructed all employees to do the same. She also participated in a number of nonprofit organizations, including the National Council for Negro Women, whose mission is to advance the opportunities and quality of life for African American women and families. She was a member of the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, an African American public service-oriented sorority that educates the community on issues affecting their lives, and the Continentals of Omega Boys and Girls Club of Vallejo, which promotes the health, social education, and character development of children in Vallejo. Mrs. Burris was married for 67 years to the late DeWitt Burris, and they had 6 children. She is survived by her daughter, Faye Anderson, her sons, Reverend Dr. Ronald Burris, Mr. Clinton Burris, and Mr. John Burris. A host of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. Mrs. Burris was the matriarch of her family who treated everyone with kindness and sincerity. She will be dearly missed. And the rest I submit.
Thank you, Madam President. Supervisor Campos. Okay. Supervisor Cohen.
Submit.
Okay. Thank you. Supervisor Farrell.
Submit.
Supervisor Kim. Re-referred. Okay. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, today on Election Day, I am introducing a charter ballot measure for the November ballot to expand democracy in San Francisco for tens of thousands of immigrant parents by allowing non-citizens the right to vote in school board elections. I wanted to thank especially Assemblyman David Chu, but my co-sponsors, Supervisors Campos and Avalos, Supervisors Cohen and Wiener, and hopefully others. I wanted to say also that it's been a 20-year struggle for voting rights for immigrant communities. Our coalition of parent and immigrant organizations spans all of our neighborhoods of our city, and now is the time that we can, in San Francisco, can pass a measure like this. I also wanted to say that San Francisco would not be alone. Chicago, New York City, and a number of jurisdictions throughout this country have allowed non-citizens the right to vote. But for most of the United States of America's history, non-citizens have been allowed to vote. It's only in the anti-immigrant movements of the 1920s and the repression of that era that it was wiped away. Now's the time for San Francisco's grassroots networks of immigrant communities, parents, and others that want expanded democracy to step forward to put San Francisco on the map to make history again. I also wanted to say, too, that our immigrant parent and immigrant community organizations are ready, from their own networks from past elections to the specter of Donald Trump's anti-immigrant rhetoric. At the national level, San Francisco could stand forward to expand rights for immigrants while others are attacking immigrants. Also, I wanted to thank leaders from our Immigrant Rights Commission, like Kathy Cole and others, for advancing this over the years. Matt Gonzalez and Mabel Tang to others over the years, but especially our grassroots coalition. Giving a voice to parents and expanding democracy is the right thing to do in San Francisco, but it also will help improve our school system by engaging more immigrant parents into the process of their children's education. Lastly, I'll just say that expanding democracy is right for San Francisco, and immigrants deserve the right to vote in school board elections. Also, I'd like to be re-referred after Supervisor Peskin to talk about the important density done right measure that he's introducing. The rest I'll submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Colleagues, I actually spoke to the legislation that Supervisor Marr just referenced last week, so I will not speak about it again. But today I will speak to legislation that we are introducing, which will ban candidate-controlled general purpose committees in the city and county of San Francisco. These general purpose committees have been used to raise unlimited funds for unspecified measures, usually over a number of election cycles, and in essence established uncontrolled funds for candidates or elected officers who control them. Unlike candidate-controlled ballot measure committees, which are established to support or oppose a specific proposition or initiative ordinance, general purpose committees do not need to specify what the money being raised is going to be spent on. As a result, as far as I can tell, the primary incentive to donate to these committees is to create a special relationship between the donor and the elected official, which is a recipe for undue influence, if not legal corruption. Not only that, these committees allow candidates and elected officers to circumvent the campaign contribution limits that exist in their own candidate races. On this election day, we have a duty as elected officers and as occasional candidates to periodically turn the lens inward and scrutinize our own practices, and in doing so, to work to reduce the influence of money in our political system. It doesn't take much introspection to realize the obvious. The amount of money flowing in and out of our political ecosystem here in San Francisco is seemingly without limit. And to the extent that the sources of these funds are increasingly consolidated among a small handful of inordinately wealthy special interests, the voices of everyday San Franciscans and residents are being drowned out by an ocean of money. I want to thank the Friends of Ethics for their research and investigation of candidate-controlled general purpose committees, and also Bob Stern, otherwise known as the godfather of campaign finance reform in the state of California, for his eloquent presentations on this issue. And I want to thank Deputy City Attorney Andrew Chen for drafting this measure. Banning candidate-controlled general purpose committees is a proactive step in the right direction, and I look forward to continuing this conversation and garnering your support over the coming weeks and months. The rest I will submit. I do want to adjourn today's meeting in the memory of Rogine Radner, and my condolences to her husband, Lee Radner, and to her 2 children.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Before we get to you, Supervisor Marr, I understand, Supervisor Wiener, you will be submitting? Okay, thank you. Supervisor Marr.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Supervisor Peskin from his comments last week on density done right as an effort to move forward San Francisco's protection of small businesses and residents in neighborhoods while also producing more affordable housing and housing for our city. I wanted to acknowledge that I was approached by the mayor's office last year to support his version of a density bonus for the West Side and other neighborhoods, but it became apparent to me from my review of the legislation that it had not been thoroughly vetted, especially by some of the West Side communities, so I know Supervisor Tang has engaged her neighborhoods. And it seemed to me that it didn't do enough to fully promote truly affordable housing and protect the affordable housing stock in the city. And I wanted to acknowledge that I'm a huge advocate of building more affordable housing and housing in general, but I don't think any development should come at the cost of the rampant evictions of our residents and the loss of our small business sectors as well. So in the past few months, I and my office and others in the Richmond District have worked to ensure that our Richmond District residents and all of our residents had a chance to at least engage on the mayor's proposal and Supervisor Tang's proposal. And I think the fruit of that labor is partially this effort from Supervisor Peskin, affordable housing groups, and tenant rights organizations and my office. As a progressive, I'm not against building more housing. In fact, I think it's critical for our whole region. But I'm actively leading to create more and to preserve more housing for the majority of San Franciscans. This legislation, and with the proposed increase to our inclusionary housing requirement on today's ballot, we're once again responding to our city's most critical need and the region's need as well. I think the Density Done Right ordinance is not just about ensuring that we are prioritizing housing development for low-income and middle-income residents, but it's also about ensuring that the community has some real, meaningful input and access into this planning process as well. So this has been a long process for our city, for San Francisco. I think Density Done Right is the right thing to do, and it helps us work together with community leaders in every district. and hopefully consolidate the Planning Commission's thoughtful recommendations. So I really thank Supervisor Peskin and the Housing Justice and Affordable Housing groups for putting their work, and many of the small business organizations that have been working on this as well. And I urge support as it moves forward for this board. The rest I'll submit. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Marr. Supervisor Kim, you asked to be re-referred.
Thank you. I don't have notes on this, but I did want to submit an in memoriam on behalf of our office to Mary Jessup, who is one of our District 6 and Tenderloin residents. Mary is someone who has been incredibly active in our neighborhood and our community, and we just learned of her passing away. I want to send my condolences to her neighbors, her friends, her family. She is someone who always had a smile on her face, attended many of our meetings for Bodecker Park, Healthy Corner Stores, pedestrian safety. She was one of those women who was active and cared to the very last day. She was one of the volunteers of Sunday Streets, and I know Sunday Streets have also sent their condolences to her as well. She was an active member and advocate for Shanti. She came out of their breast cancer program, and she has fought cancer and has beat cancer. She spent her life actually teaching in our public schools before she retired, and volunteered her time doing a tremendous amount of work in our neighborhoods. She will be missed tremendously, but most of all, she was just one of the sweetest and kindest people that I knew, and her heart was incredibly genuine. And so, Mary, we will miss you immensely. Rest in peace. Thank you for all your work and advocacy and for your care for your neighbors and constituents here in the Tenderloin neighborhood, and the rest I submit.
Thank you, Supervisor Kim. Madam President, that concludes the introduction of new business.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Can you please read public comment?
Madam President?
Supervisor Weiner?
There's a 3 p.m. special order that's going to be continued that was skipped over.
Oh, I apologize. So we can go back to, is that your item?
It is a conditional use appeal.
Okay.
That will be continued.
Okay. Madam Clerk, excuse me, to members of the public, I apologize. We need to get to a 3 p.m. special order. Madam Clerk, can you get to the 3 p.m. Special order? Thank you.
Items 38 through 41 comprise the special order at 3 p.m. for a public hearing of persons interested in the Planning Commission's certification of a conditional use authorization dated September 24th, 2015, for certification of a conditional use authorization dated March 31st, 2016, for a proposed project at 313-323 Cumberland Street. Item 39 is a motion to approve the Commission's decision to approve the conditional use authorization. Item 40 is a motion to disapprove the Commission's decision to approve the conditional use. And item 41 is a motion to direct preparation of findings.
Supervisor Weiner?
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, the parties have agreed to and requested a 1-week continuance, so I move to continue this appeal to next Tuesday, June 14th.
Supervisor Weiner has moved and is seconded by Supervisor Campos. Is there any other members of the public who'd like to provide public comment specifically on this item? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Madam Clerk, on the motion to continue, can you please call the roll?
Supervisor Yee?
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos? Aye. Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed?
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos?
Aye.
Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen? Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell? Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim? Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr? Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin?
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang? Tang, aye. Supervisor Weiner?
Aye.
Weiner, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Okay, this item will be continued 1 week to the meeting of June 14, 2016. Madam Clerk, can you now please read public comment?
At this time, the public may now address the entire Board of Supervisors for up to 2 minutes on items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Board, to include the minutes and items on the adoption without reference to committee calendar, items 46 through 52. Public comment is not allowed when an item has been previously subject to public comment at a Board committee. Pursuant to the board's rules, direct your remarks to the board as a whole, not to individual supervisors and not to the audience, please. Speakers using translation assistance will be allowed twice the amount of time to testify, and if you would like to display your document on the overhead projector, please clearly state such to SFG TV and remove the document when you would like the screen to return to live coverage of the meeting.
First speaker, please.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أيها الإخوة المسلمون في كل مكان من أمريكا، اسمي عبد الله مجاهد وأنا مصري عربي مسلم. أود أن أقول لكم رمضان كريم أعاده الله علينا وعليكم باليمن والبركات. أمس يوم الاثنين ده كان أول يوم لينا كمسلمين ببداية شهر الكرم والصوم. يوم الجمعة السابق خسرت أمريكا والعالم كله بطل عالمي اسمه محمد علي، رفض أن يشارك في حرب فيتنام، ومع ذلك رفض أن يوضع اسمه على الأرض حتى لا يداس عليه بالجزم، وأجيب على طلبه احتراما لاسم محمد. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. As you know, my name is Abdullah Mujahid. I am here today to tell you that yesterday, Monday, used to be the first day from Ramadan. And last Friday, last America, but the world, the best man who his name Muhammad Ali. My age is same age like him, and God bless me, and God give me time to see him 2 times. In 60, I met him in Egypt, Cairo. In 90, I have a chance to see him in Oakland. And what I did to him, because I am far from him, I tell him that, can you play with me? I did 2 times, and he laughing. And he tell to his wife that I am crazy. And his wife like it what I did, and they make him laughing. She asked me to stay with him, and I have proud to be with him 1 hour in my life. And I take him and I support him until he get to his car. I have little bit message I can tell him. Goodbye, our best friend, our Muslim Muhammad Ali, and go with rest and peace. I have another copy here I would like to give our supervisor. Please, can you take that to give him or to give all of them? God bless all of you, and I give him salute for what he did and what he let us like it. God bless all of you. Thank you for that time.
Thank you, Abdullah. Next speaker, please.
Cesar Chavez spoke out very strongly against the racist organization La Raza. For good reason. He knew what he was talking about. You know, Trump's getting in hot water because of his comments that he made, but this judge is a member of La Raza. Study La Raza. They talk about murdering people. They're a terrible, wicked organization. And Eddie Garcia, who's the chief of police in San Jose, there's a reason why we had chaos. Okay, Sam Liccardo, I called up Sam. Okay, they all know me down there, and I didn't get through to him. But I was going to ask him to say a few kind words about Donald Trump. You know, we have our, he has his differences, but no, he's strongly siding with Hillary. But I find it interesting. You know, the Bible says that, behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump. It's just strange. I'm not saying he's in the Bible, but I am saying Cyrus was, and it's an interesting story. In Josephus, and he wrote the Antiquities of the Jews. He says that Daniel showed Cyrus these prophecies about himself in Isaiah, and were written about 200 years before Cyrus was born. And he was so elated he did what God said he would do. And we are wrapping up the end of the age. We are coming so close to the end. And I'm not sure when the Sabbath year began. It possibly began April 13th. I got on the Alex Jones show that day and was able to make the announcement that the times of the Gentiles has ended. As a matter of fact, May 20th was exactly 7,365 days from the end of the times of the Gentiles, when the Jubilee began, the 70th Jubilee. Jesus Christ is coming soon. We are in the Sabbath year, the Shemitah, right now.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Political leaders work very hard on extending future high aspiration of career in destiny for service of the people, and they should reason well in true principles for their profitable struggle for true success. With adequate contemplation for a better awakening, one surely can open up 100 years of credible fame for establishing eternal foundation for the city, state, and nation, like police matter, transportation, housing, education, business development, government law, and other public facilities of concern, in terms of well-organized planning, well-structured order for the majority of the people. Elections always come to be extremely competitive for the candidates. The outcomes surely would determine the future course of an exciting continuation of career for all winners. But life of destiny for all mighty missionary leaders are actually heading for a wide diversity of adventure, of humanity and justice. Political leaders should work harder to fight for the right of the people, no matter in what platform or public service. Your people are with you all the way. In case of days of your difficulties, please just look back to the past working glory of your mighty good deeds you have performed, and you should have no trouble in successfully moving forward to resolve any problem and to enjoy your daily new living conditions upon our blissful kingdom of four seas in great sight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Thank you, President Breed, and all the members of the cabal. My name is Christopher Dahl, and I still live at 6th and Howard, 10 blocks and less than 14 meters from sea level. I rise to reprise a comment of mine of January 12th, 2010. Quote, I'd like to draw the board's attention to Article 3 of our beloved Charter, and specifically to the second sentence of Section 3.100, where it says, and I quote, the mayor shall devote his or her entire time and attention to the duties of the office and shall not give any time or attention to any other occupation or business activity. I would definitely characterize a campaign for governor or any office other than a second term as mayor of our beloved city and county as other occupation or business activity. Why is the board merely requiring the mayor to rebate his security detail costs when the board could and should be demanding that he return all salary and benefits and expenses paid to him between his official announcement of candidacy for governor and final withdrawal? He certainly failed each and every one of those days to apply his entire time and attention to the duties of the office, and anything less than his entire time and attention is his entire failure to serve. He should also rebate salary and benefits and expenses for each day he failed when asked to categorically deny that he would be a candidate for governor. And he should rebate salary and benefits and expenses for each day of his expected service when he was so disengaged from contact with our beloved city and county that there was no officially designated acting mayor. I would also ask the board to rebate salary and benefits and expenses for themselves and for their staff for each day of debate on this matter, either in committee or before the full board, when no member raised the issue of a possible conflict with the charter. I would like to thank everyone for epitomizing the theme of managerial class negligence. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Hello, Christy Wong, Community Planning Policy Director for SPUR. Thank you for the opportunity to comment today. I want to speak to item number 49, which is the proposed resolution before you urging our state legislators to oppose the proposed by right housing approvals budget trailer bill. And we at SPUR urge you to instead support the governor's proposal. This is a statewide bill, and it will have statewide benefits. But San Francisco residents would also benefit from it. While San Francisco does a very good job funding and approving subsidized affordable housing, it has many other problems with its planning process, which together contribute to a situation of chronic delay, high costs, and undersupply of housing. This reform is important for a number of reasons. It's important for the environment, and it will encourage high-density, compact infill development close to transit and in developed urban areas rather than in greenfield locations. It's important for social justice. It will encourage mixed-income infill development in places that have no local inclusionary housing requirements. This reform is important for livability, encouraging concentrated development in locations that are conducive to walking, biking, and taking public transit. And this reform is important for retaining San Francisco's diversity. It will lead to reduced displacement and greater affordability in our city, both directly through its impacts on our planning process and indirectly through its impacts on the housing supply in other Bay Area cities. Under the governor's proposal, San Francisco will still have great control over land use. We will still be able to develop our own zoning, but the zoning will actually matter, and there will be predictable, transparent rules that govern the development instead of an unpredictable system where we routinely reject projects. So to be clear, there will still be a significant process, public input, and decision-making by elected officials. The process will simply take place at the level of the general plan, area plans, and zoning rather than at the individual project level. We urge you to support rather than oppose the proposed trailer bill on streamlining affordable housing approvals in order to expand housing opportunities for San Francisco, Bay Area, and California residents. In tandem with funding with permanent affordable housing, overall supply is part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. I'm talking about item 49 as well. San Francisco has contributed to over 7,000 permanently affordable low and moderate income housing units and over 13,000 above moderate income units with 11,000 units in the pipeline, fully entitled, and an additional 20,000 units being reviewed for approval. San Francisco is being lumped in with a bunch of dissimilar cities who are not creating such numbers of housing which this state trailer bill is supposed to address. Yet it dismisses the work done by city leaders and our state representatives Chu, Ting, and Leno. The governor's budget trailer bill of by right housing approvals will preempt the will of this board for decisions regarding the local inclusionary housing requirements, including having performance standards applicable to San Francisco. The by right housing approval budget trailer bill should be amended or opposed to allow the state to respect and preserve local authority. San Francisco is such a special place. We value your decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Mary Eliza here. I'm actually here to thank the Board of Supervisors for not supporting the trailer bill, and I'm also here to thank you for supporting the charter amendment to put some restrictions on the MTA board. For some time now, they've been having a war on the citizens of the city and our visitors by making it really difficult for people to get around, to live their lives without great stress. And now I think they've really gone too far by removing bus seats off of buses. It was bad enough that they had to take away bus stops and make people with heavy packages and children and other kind of situations have to walk longer distances to get on the bus, but now they also want you to be able to stand on the bus. I'm speaking from experience. I actually fell on a moving bus one time and I badly injured myself, so I can tell you I will not be standing on any buses or or BART cars or trains of any kind. I find it really a dangerous situation, and I hope that this Board of Supervisors will reconsider having any more buses removed off of seats removed off of buses. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm going to have a few point. Yeah. Greetings, Supervisors. My name is Qian Zhang, and I'm a software engineer in Cisco Systems. I play piccolo in the U.S. West Divine Line Marching Band. On April 19th, Mr. Richard Hashimoto, president of Japantown Merchants Association, blocked our band from attending the Cherry Blossom Parade and gave no convincing reason. Days of hard practice and preparation went wasted, and we were deeply hurt. 2 days ago, last Sunday, this same band joined San Bruno Posey Day Parade, which is just 12 miles away from here. It was not only warmly received, but also won the special award of the parade. I'll show you a few pictures of last Sunday's San Bruno Parade. This is our band members. Next. This is our band performing. Next. This is an excited mom and daughter taking photo with us. Next. This is Mr. Mal Phillips, the San Bruno Lions and the parade chairman. He gave us the cup for the special award last Sunday. So just within 2 months and a few miles away, the same band was treated completely differently. And you wonder why. What's happening to San Francisco? Is San Francisco a city that is ruled by the Communist Party? Apparently no. Is San Francisco a city known for bias and discrimination? Apparently no. Then why is San Francisco so different from San Bruno, a city just 12 miles away? The reason lies in that Chinese Communist government, through its San Francisco Chinese General Consulate and proxies in San Francisco, polluted the minds of San Francisco citizens and officials and influenced their behavior to the point of abandoning the values that this nation was built upon and bringing shame and disgrace to this great city. I really wish you would look into this issue and help us resolve the undeserved rejection. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Han Yushi. I'm a citizen live in San Francisco. I'm here to express my concern regarding the West Coast. The Wineland Marching Band was rejected on the Cherry Bloom Festival. We already got permission from the organizer, and we dressed up and showed up. But at the last moment, we were told we were rejected. That doesn't make sense. I served the country in Navy since 2014. Our mission is to fight for the freedom of the world. But my freedom of parade was deprived at that moment. In the country which I serve, I feel belief discrimination and not fair. Back in history, pursuing freedom of belief is the great country, the United States. Pursuing freedom of belief is the reason why the great country, the United States of America, established. That's also the reason why I came to America from China. I want freedom, fairness, and no discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
I'm going to translate for her.
Okay,
各位
thank you.
尊敬的市议员，你们好。
Dear Honorable Board of Supervisors,
我是李香一，来自旧金山，是钢琴老师，法轮大法天国乐团萨斯声部长。
my name is Xiangyi Li, a San Francisco resident. I'm a pianist and I play saxophone in the U.S. West Divine Line Marching Band.
也许你们会想，你们不能参加日本城的游行，为什么要一再来到市议会？为什么不去找游行的主办者Hashimoto 先生？
You might think your group was excluded from the Japantown's Cherry Blossom Festival Grand Parade. But why you keep coming back to the Board of Supervisors meeting? Why don't you go find the parade organizer, Mr. Hashimoto?
第一个原因是这次游行和中国城的新年游行一样，拒绝天国乐团的原因是一样的，和日本城樱花节游行没有什么直接的关系，而根本上是因为中共政权在背后的支持。
First, the Japantown parade excluded us, the U.S. West Divine Line Marching Band, due to the same root cause that the Southwest Airlines Chinese New Year parade excluded us. The Chinese Communist regime has hugely influenced San Francisco, and the root of the problem goes beyond Mr. Hashimoto.
第二个原因是日本樱花节游行和中国城新年游行一样，都是由市政府部分资助的，用的是纳税人的钱，包括这些被游行排斥在外的天国乐团成员他们交的税。
Second, both Japantown Parade and Southwest Airlines Chinese New Year Parade are funded partly by the San Francisco city government. This public money came from taxpayers, including us, the members of U.S. West Divine Line Marching Band, who live in San Francisco. So we have a right to raise our issue here.
第三个原因是，这个拒绝的本质是对美国立国精神的背叛，对美国根本价值的背叛，对自容包容的旧金山的背叛。
Third, and the most important, this issue is much bigger than just the parade. The essence of this exclusion is about the fundamental values of America. It's about what this country is and is not. It's about the name and image of San Francisco.
试想想，如果几十年之后，世界知道了中共对法轮功的残酷迫害，知道了几百万人因为修炼法轮功被投入监狱、劳教所，被中共迫害致死，知道有6万人甚至更多的人因为修炼法轮功被中共活摘器官而死，那个时候世界也知道了，旧金山的居民和政府就会成为迫害有意或无意的帮凶。你们将如何面对这一历史和自己的子孙
Think about it. After a few years, the world will come to know the brutal persecution of Falun Gong by the Chinese Communist Party, to find out that several million people were thrown to jails and labor camp. Many died of persecution. To know that over 60,000 and possibly a lot more people were killed for their organs, the forced live organ harvesting against their will. At that time, the world also comes to know that San Francisco was once assisted the Chinese Communist Party, the persecutor, intentionally or unintentionally. How will you face this part of history? Face your own children.
市议员们，这次游行的问题远远超过事件本身，涉及我们如何捍卫我们的价值、精神和道德。我们期待你们的关注和帮助。谢谢。
Dear Supervisors, the issue of excluding us from the parade goes far beyond the parade itself. It relates to how we safeguard our values, spirit, and morals of this country and of this city. We are looking forward to your attention and help. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Tim Colon on behalf of the 300 member organizations and individuals of the San Francisco Housing Action Coalition. I want to express our strong support for Governor Brown's proposals for by right housing and for the density bonus streamlining, and we would hope that the Board of Supervisors would support the governor's efforts on our behalf. And I want to draw your attention to a remarkable letter that came out last week from a consortium of statewide affordable housing and social justice groups that took a remarkable position of saying we support the governor's effort, but with certain amendments. And the amendments are pretty common sense. There's nothing terribly difficult about them. And I would imagine that that's a very constructive approach the city could take in this. The plain truth is that our housing affordability and displacement crises keep getting worse year after year because we lack the tools at the local level to make a difference. We badly need the state's help if we want a different future for San Francisco. As Governor Brown in the Legislative Analyst's Office recently noted, we do not have the resources to subsidize our way out of our housing predicament, and until we figure out new approaches to dramatically increase housing production, it does not seem likely that the displacement of low-income and increasingly middle-income folks can be slowed, much less stopped. And opposing or trying to get San Francisco exempted from this raises some difficult questions, because if San Francisco succeeds in exempting itself from the governor's proposal, wouldn't many other communities across the state make similar requests? And I think that there's a fallback position we all agree on is we do want more funding from the state for affordable housing. We don't have enough. The federal government's getting out of it. The state has inadequate resources. That's a good ask to make of the governor, but nothing we're doing at the local level scales to the enormity of the challenge we're facing, and I would hope that you would support the governor's position. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good evening, Supervisors, particularly my sisters in the back there. My name is Ace, and I'm on a case. I'm speaking from the heart, and I hope you hear me through your ears. So lend me your ears. I'm putting the city on notice, specifically our African-American black sisters that know about the out-migration. Knowing that it's institutionalized through the then Mayor Newsom, now Lieutenant Governor Newsom, that was transferred over to the then now Mayor Ed Lee that didn't do a damn thing for people who look like me. Huh? It wasn't in the budget. It wasn't in the budget. That was the problem that that's what Fred Blackwell told Human Rights. The only problem that Newsom couldn't administrate it because he was $5 million in the red. But now we're $5 billion in the green, and you ain't got nothing for people that look like me? Unconstitutionalized. There is a reason for briefs to be filed. Sisters, the legislators, Movers and shakers, policymakers, listen to what I got to say, because once I go and put something in writing, it's going to stop everything. Things that you guys, it's so exciting. Sisters in the back, come on now. How could you dare me sitting up here? 62 years. I've been in politics back when y'all was little girls, but now you women, you're policymakers. You should be. I'm proud of you. But there's something missing. Legislations that prepare something for our youngsters that's here. These other legislators are putting things together. That's what y'all do. Make history. Let me talk to you. Because the mayor don't care. Ed Lee, he knows me. We worked together when he was with the HRC.
Thank you, Mr. Washington.
And the thing about that's going to take place.
Next speaker, please. And Mr. Washington, just for next time you appear here, please direct your remarks to the board as a whole, not to individual supervisors, please.
We were listening, Mr.
Please.
Washington. I heard every word. Thank you.
Next speaker, please. Go ahead, Mr. Gilberti.
Tom Gilberti. Before November's election in 2015, I remarked about how I was disappointed in the leadership of these Democratic Party. And as Mr. A said, he did nothing, Mayor did nothing for his people. He did very little for anybody that was living in the city. Corporate giveaways, real estate, profiteering, Airbnb, the ride shares. You know, if you brought your money, you got to have a Super Bowl. Hopefully that's our last Super Bowl party. Let's bury that one. And then there was he was running unopposed. Supposedly we had a kumbaya moment, and maybe that's paying dividends, because I saw in all the printed political mail, there's an alternative slate. Choice is better. The first game of the basketball finals, I was watching at my mother's house, Franklin and Chestnut. Left right after the game, at the Embarcadero station, riding the Underground, I met a guy that came from the basketball game, and he was riding on BART. He would have gotten there sooner, but he kind of took a Richmond train instead of, so he had to wait a little bit longer. I don't understand why we are changing 3 lines of BART and a freeway for 4 lanes of surface street. It's still ridiculous. Transportation and density at this part doesn't make sense. Voting today, independents, 1/3 at least, the left and the right, and the crowds are carrying Bernie, and the establishment is carrying Hillary.
Mr. Gilberti,
We're not doing anything. Oh, my time is gone. What happened there?
Thank you, Mr. Gilberti. Next speaker, please. Are there any other speakers who are interested in making public comment? Seeing none, Madam President.
Thank you. Seeing no other speakers who'd like to make public comment is now closed. Madam Clerk, let's get back to our agenda.
Items 46 through 52 are being considered for immediate adoption without committee reference. A single roll call vote may enact these items. A member may object, sever an item, and have it considered separately.
Okay. Are there any? Supervisor Wiener?
46 and 49.
All right. Seeing no other names on the roster, on the remaining items, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Items 46 through 52 without 46 and 49. Supervisor Yee.
Aye.
Yee, aye. Supervisor Avalos.
Aye.
Avalos, aye. Supervisor Breed.
Aye.
Breed, aye. Supervisor Campos. Campos, aye. Supervisor Cohen.
Aye.
Cohen, aye. Supervisor Farrell.
Aye.
Farrell, aye. Supervisor Kim. Kim, aye. Supervisor Marr.
Aye.
Marr, aye. Supervisor Peskin.
Aye.
Peskin, aye. Supervisor Tang.
Aye.
Tang, aye. Supervisor Wiener.
Aye.
Wiener, aye. There are 11 ayes.
Those items are approved unanimously. Madam Clerk, please call item number 46.
Item 46 is a resolution to urge the Recreation and Park Department to discontinue permanently the pilot program whereby individuals can reserve open space at Mission Dolores Park, and to urge the Recreation and Park Department to discontinue any such rental program for any grass plot throughout San Francisco public parks.
Supervisor Kim.
Thank you, President Breed. I'd like to refer this item to committee.
Okay. Supervisor Kim has made a motion to refer to committee, seconded by Supervisor Cohen. Colleague.
Madam President, Supervisor Kim has the privilege to send that to committee.
Yes, so it will go to committee. Thank you, colleagues, for reminding me. All right, with that, let's go to item number 49.
Item 49 is a resolution to urge the San Francisco legislative delegation to amend or oppose the by right housing approvals proposed trailer bill in recognition of San Francisco's local planning tools and significant contributions to regional housing development.
Supervisor Wiener, you asked for this item to be pulled?
Sure, and I'm happy to defer to the author if he wants to speak first, or I'm happy to be. Okay. Thank you, Madam President. And I'm distributing an amendment of the whole here, which I previously did provide earlier today to Supervisor Peskin. Colleagues, whatever one's view on the trailer bill that Governor Brown has proposed, I think it's a good thing that our governor has begun to call the question in terms of housing in California. We are truly in a crisis, not just here in San Francisco, but throughout much of the Bay Area and through more and more parts of California, where housing is exorbitantly expensive, and where particularly our lower income and middle class residents are being priced out and often squeezed out of their communities. It is unsustainable, it is inequitable, it is a threat to our economy, and it's a threat to our environment as people are forced to move further and further away from their community and from where they work. This is a statewide issue. It is an issue that the state legislature and the governor should be taking up. And again, whatever one's view on this bill, it is good that we are finally seeing a push, in this case by the governor. We know that there are also bills from various members of the legislature to address other aspects of the statewide housing crisis, and that is a good thing. I have the trailer legislation, the trailer bill for as of right housing. It is not perfect, and there are parts of that particular bill that I don't agree with. From my read, it makes it too easy. It loosens up demolition controls. And the last thing we need is to make it easier to demolish housing, particularly rent-controlled housing in San Francisco. It does not allow nearly enough latitude in terms of reviewing design, architecture, urban design in general, and making sure that we are getting high quality, well-designed development with good streetscaping. It also, I think, potentially could short-circuit some environmental and labor standards that are very important. However, the heart of this legislation, I think, is really about the number of units allowed under zoning. And we see far too often, and I'm talking throughout the state, situations where the zoning allows for a particular number of units, and through the approval process and through community opposition, that number of units are pushed down. So a project is zoned for 50 units, but they're only allowed to build 20 units. When that happens over and over again, as it does, we have less housing. At the heart of our housing crisis is that we have grown tremendously. San Francisco has grown by 200,000 people since 1980. The Bay Area, I believe, has grown by 2.5 million people since 1980. And we have not created enough housing to keep up. And the result is an explosion of housing prices. And that is at the heart of the problem. And this problem is not going to go away. The Bay Area is projected to grow by 2 million people, an additional 2 million people between now and 2040. San Francisco is projected to break 1 million people by 2040. And so this problem is not going away. And we have to get it together in terms of housing production. And affordable, subsidized below market rate housing, of course, is a crucial part of the solution. And we need the legislature to help us and other communities to fund affordable housing. But that is not the total solution. In addition, we have to have more housing of all types overall. We are never, ever going to solve this problem or come close to solving this problem without a robust mix of housing creation, including subsidized below market rate housing, but including other forms of housing as well. The problem I have with blanket opposition to the bill is that it does not take into account the need for more housing overall. And the problem I have with the provision in the current resolution before us that asks for an exemption of any jurisdiction, if I read it correctly, where at least 25% of our overall housing production is below market rate, affordable to low income or moderate income. The problem with that is it doesn't set any standards for what the overall housing production is. So 25% of a small number of units might be a high percentage, but that's still a small number of units, and our housing crisis then continues to get worse and worse and worse. So I don't agree also with the whereas clauses in the resolution before us, which really, frankly, I think paint an inaccurate picture of where we are in San Francisco. San Francisco is not doing well when it comes to housing. San Francisco, frankly, is doing poorly when it comes to housing, and the proof is in the pudding, with the average rent being $3,500 a month. In the last couple of years, we have accelerated housing production, and that is after many, many, many years of largely very, very low housing production. So it's great that for a couple years now we've been doing better. That needs to continue, but let's not pretend like we're doing awesome in San Francisco, and so we need to be exempted from any state effort to try to improve housing policy in California. So the amendments recognize in the whereas clauses the gravity of the situation in terms of our housing crisis that is threatening the very fabric of our community, not just in San Francisco, but elsewhere. And instead of opposing the legislation or asking for an exemption from the legislation, the revised language that I've distributed instead commends the governor for stepping up to call the question, but also recognizes that there are flaws in this legislation and asks our state delegation to work to amend the legislation to focus it on making sure that communities are not arbitrarily reducing the number of units allowed under the zoning while keeping fully intact other areas where we want to make sure that local control is robust, including relating to urban design standards and architectural standards, regarding affordability and the affordability percentage, relating to the preservation of historic buildings, relating to the preservation of rent-controlled housing stock to make sure that this legislation does not in any way make it easier to demolish our housing stock, in terms of labor controls or labor standards, including prevailing wage, and environmental standards, including conformity with Senate Bill 375. And so I think this resolution, the amendments that I'm proposing, will focus our efforts. Instead of just opposing or asking for San Francisco to be exempted, it will focus us on what really needs to happen at the state level, which is to stop the reduction in the housing that's produced, as opposed to these other issues which should be amended out of the bill. So colleagues, I have distributed this amendment, and I move that we adopt this amendment of the whole.
Supervisor Wiener has made a motion to amend, seconded by Supervisor Farrell. Supervisor Peskin.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, Supervisor Wiener did indeed approach me with respect to his amendment of the whole shortly before the board meeting this afternoon. We were busy celebrating Lee Hepner's birthday, so I only got to read it as I walked into the board chambers. And try, though I might, to try to scramble and come up with a compromise resolution, I cannot stand by this complete rewrite of, frankly, what I think is a very solid position for San Francisco County. And I think that there are many places, Supervisor Wiener and I agree, but I don't think this is a one-size-fits-all solution. And there are certainly municipalities all across the state of California that could benefit by the governor's trailing legislation, the by right, as it's called, legislation, but that one-size-fits-all solution actually does not work for San Francisco. And I don't want to quibble over little details, but for instance, just relative to some of the recitals that Supervisor Wiener is proposing, San Francisco has not grown by 200,000 people since 1980. The population of San Francisco was not 600,000 people in 1980. There's a huge amount of turnover and a huge amount of replacement, but I just disagree with that number as a matter of fact. I do understand what you're saying, what Supervisor Wiener is saying with regard to this percentage number, but let's look at the numbers in the state of California, not just as a function of percentage, but as a function of total development of units that are very low, and all affordable units. 7-year period in Los Angeles, total, all affordable, 7,957 units between 2006 and 2013. Compare that to San Francisco. By the way, they built 46,738 total units during that time. Compare that with San Francisco. We built 7,064 all affordable units on a total of 20,455 during that time. I mean, those are just raw numbers. We have led the state. I absolutely agree with my colleague Supervisor Wiener that there's so much more that we can and should do, but somebody actually has to stand up and say that the governor's solution is not the right solution for San Francisco County. It disadvantages San Francisco County, and that is precisely why State Senator Leno is actually pushing performance-based exceptions in the trailing bill in Sacramento. Colleagues, I think that this resolution is fine exactly the way it sits. We have used our existing tools, and those tools, by the way, will be augmented tonight after the polls close when a certain proposition passes. But we have been using the tools that we have to get increased amounts of affordable housing. That is actually what the conditional use process affords us. By right actually disadvantages the city and county of San Francisco. The good news is there's not very much policy difference in this body. The case that Supervisor Wiener spoke to, where a property could have 30 units, but the city insists should only have 12, well, that actually doesn't happen. We are all of the same policy mind. And while it is true that we had a little bit of a global recession between 2008 and 2012, the work that the board that I served on previously did authorized the increased, more dense development of 22% of the city. Everything that you see, Octavia Boulevard, Rincon Hill, Supervisor Kim's district, the Hunters Point Shipyard, all of that was authorized, and all of that is rolling out. Is there a lot more that we have to do? Absolutely, but I don't believe that the trailing bill is the right way to go, and I respectfully would hope that we can pass this resolution as is.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Tang.
Thank you. Thank you for all of the comments that were made. And I would say that, first of all, there are portions of the governor's trailing bill that I agree with, and there are things that I do not agree with. And so I can understand the reaction that has been sparked and why Supervisor Peskin's resolution has been brought forth. With that said, I think that I would like to associate myself with Supervisor Wiener's comments, and I think that what he's proposing is something that's very fair. Instead of asking for a wholesale exemption for San Francisco, which every other jurisdiction will probably also be asking for as well. We're just saying, hey, governor's office, we would like you to make some amendments to adopt or adapt it to so that we're not ceding over complete local control over planning decisions and development issues here in San Francisco. I I just don't understand what would set apart San Francisco from other jurisdictions that the governor's office would actually allow only San Francisco to have an exemption from his proposal. And so, again, I think that what is probably better for us to do as a united front from San Francisco is to say, there are certain things that we locally would like to preserve. So, for example, allowing our local jurisdictions to have the ability to make decisions about good design, making sure that we're having policies in place that prevent us from demolishing rent-controlled units, historic preservation issues, making sure that we are keeping an eye on that. Making sure that we're limiting demolitions in general, making sure that we are paying attention to certain environmental studies and standards that we want to promote here in San Francisco. I think that those are all fair things to ask for in terms of what we want for local control, while not saying, hey, let's just exempt out San Francisco completely. One of the things that Supervisor Peskin, I know you mentioned, is that there are plenty of other jurisdictions throughout California that would actually, where this proposal from the governor, where it would be good for us to have this in place. I would take it a little bit further and say that although maybe we feel that San Francisco as a whole is doing better than some other jurisdictions, there are actually some neighborhoods within and districts within San Francisco that could be doing better. I think the West Side, for example, is one of them. We talk a lot about density equity, and that's something that I would like to promote as much as possible while preserving our neighborhood characteristics. And so, again, I think that although I agree with Supervisor Peskin that the governor's proposal is a one size that does not fit all, I do think that what Supervisor Wiener's amendments have brought forth are very fair and allows us to continue working with the governor's office on future amendments to allow us to retain some sort of local control over certain issues. So I would support the amendments today.
Thank you, Supervisor Tang. Supervisor Peskin, I just had a question for you regarding your resolution. Realistically, do you think, especially when San Francisco under State Senator Mark Leno, when he tried to propose specific reforms around the Ellis Act for San Francisco, they unfortunately failed. Realistically, do you think that there is a real chance that San Francisco, through this urging, could actually receive an exemption?
I do.
Can you explain why you think that's the case?
Because our legislative delegation is uniquely positioned in Sacramento by virtue of the fact that State Senator Leno is the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and this trailing legislation is part of the entire appropriation negotiation in Sacramento, was the subject of discussion in conference last Thursday night, where Senator Leno made it abundantly clear what his position was, and further, given that our Assembly member Phil Ting is the chair of budget on the Assembly side, San Francisco is uniquely positioned.
Thank you, Supervisor Peskin. Supervisor Peskin, you had your name on the roster again.
I just wanted to rise to remind everybody, and I think this is worth noting, that we are all in receipt of a letter dated yesterday from the San Francisco Labor Council, which is something I think we should take very seriously. Yes, we receive letters from the Labor Council periodically. This letter is written to express their strong opposition to the development by right proposal of Governor Brown's administration. And I think it's particularly important because when the Labor Council does that, that is all of labor speaking. That is the building trade speaking. That is the municipal employees speaking. That is the healthcare workers speaking. That is the hotel workers speaking. I think that is very, very important. I also want to remind people that there is not a single local housing organization that supports the trailing legislation. These are housing organizations that are devoted to making sure that we build the maximum feasible amount of affordable housing that San Francisco can build, whether it's BMRs, whether it's subsidized housing, whether it's public housing. Not a single one of those organizations are supporting the trailing legislation. And then I want to ring a note for democracy and transparency, which is unlike any other bill that is heard by this body or is heard by the legislature. This has not been the subject of public hearings in Sacramento. This has not been the subject of deliberations. This is at the very end of the session, and it is scheduled to be voted on in the next few days. I have just spoken with Supervisor Wiener, and I think we have come up with a judicious compromise for all of you, which is that this item be continued 1 week. That will give Supervisor Wiener the opportunity to move his companion resolution forward, and perhaps in the intervening week, with a sufficient time, we can marry those two together and come up with something, a consensus piece, or we'll have both of them in front of us next Tuesday.
So, Supervisor Peskin, is that a motion?
Not yet.
Okay. Supervisor Wiener?
Thank you very much, Madam President. And I appreciate the comments by Supervisor Peskin. I do want to note that we did see a letter from a coalition of statewide affordable housing organizations and anti-poverty organizations indicating that they would be willing to support the trailer bill with certain amendments. So I think that our statewide affordable housing organizations, rather than having an automatic oppose or exempt whoever, have indicated that they want to work collaboratively to try to come up with a solution. And so I just wanted to note that for the record. And yes, Supervisor Peskin is correct. He and I just had a discussion, and what we've agreed to, rather than me asking that this go to committee, instead Supervisor Peskin would continue, ask that his item be continued 1 week. I will then introduce my amendments as a standalone alternative resolution for next week's agenda, and Supervisor Peskin has what I requested as part of my agreement not to send his resolution to the committee was an agreement not to then send my resolution to the committee next week. In other words, both resolutions would be able to receive an up or down vote at next week's board meeting unless we're able to work something out ahead of time. Is that correct, Supervisor Peskin?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so is there a motion on the table? Supervisor Peskin.
Motion to continue item 49 for 1 week.
Supervisor Peskin has made a motion to continue this item 1 week to the meeting of June 14, 2016. Is there a second? Seconded by Supervisor Cohen. Colleagues, can we take this without objection? Without objection, the item will be continued to the meeting of Tuesday, June 14, 2016. Madam Clerk, will you please read the in memoriams?
Yes, Madam President. Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of the following beloved individuals. On behalf of Supervisor Kim, for the late Mrs. Mary Jessup. On behalf of Supervisor Peskin, for the late Mrs. Rogine Radner. And on behalf of President Breed, for the late Miss Imogen Burris.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This brings us to the end of... Oh, Supervisor Cohen is also a part of that in memoriam. For Imogen Burris.
We will add your name. Thank you.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. Are there any other items before us today?
That concludes our business for today.
Okay. Good luck, everybody, today. Looking forward to the election results after 8 o'clock. Don't forget to vote. We are adjourned.